I spent way too much time thinking about the scenes from the Dragon Tier memories in A Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And my biggest question was, where do they actually take place? So I thought that in this video I'm gonna take a look at that and go through all the memories, trying to find out where in Hyrule we actually are. If you haven't already guessed, there will be spoilers for Tears of the Kingdom in this video. So as usual, if you want to play the game by yourself, be aware. These are just my personal observations and sometimes interpretations. I don't claim that what I present here is the way the developers at Nintendo intended the story of their game to be like, but hey, it's fun to theorize a bit. If you disagree with me, feel free to leave a comment underneath this video. Just try to be constructive. I'm happy to read any ideas and theories that I wasn't able to think about on the spot. That being said, I'm not going to go through the videos chronologically, but rather put them in categories. The ones that are easy to locate and the ones that are a little bit more complex.
First of all, there are some memories that do not really matter. Memory number 1, 2, and 18 do not play in the past or even in perceived reality, so we don't need to talk about those. The first few memories after Zelda travels to the past are quite easy to locate. Memories number 3 and 4 play directly after one another. At the beginning of memory number 4, Zelda looks over Hyrule and we see the exact same landscape that Link saw at the beginning of Breath of the Wild, when he left the Shrine of Resurrection. We can see Death Mountain and the Forest of Spirits. Some things are obviously different. Hyrule Castle has not been built yet. It will be built as a safety measure after Ganondorf is defeated, as we know from the stone slab in the emergency tunnel, so it is not in the scene. Still, we can very clearly say that those scenes play at the Great Plateau, according to King Roam, the birthplace of the kingdom. One thing that is quite interesting in this shot is that all of Hyrule Field is actually filled with trees. While hard to tell, it is quite possible that the forest goes all the way down to Faron, which is not that far from the Great Plateau. This would make the map look a bit closer to what we know from Skyward Sword, and makes sense if you believe in the theory that the plateau is actually the Isle of Goddess from that game. Memory 6 gives us a better look at the Great Plateau and confirms that this is actually the place where Zelda meets Roru and Sonia. We can see Ganondorf standing on a rock that looks like part of the Eastern Gerudo Highlands, close to the canyon. It is orange sandstone, but not high enough for there to be snow. If you try to line up the perspectives with in-game, he was probably standing somewhere around here. It might not seem very important, but we can also see what is probably Rito Village in this scene. Just another marker that confirms that the place Ganondorf wants to invade is very likely the Great Plateau. The Moldugas come from the southeast, which is quite interesting since that means they come from Osera Plains, which does not have a direct connection to their alleged home in the desert as far as we know. Maybe that used to be different. We can see what is very clearly the flat mountain in Osera Plains here. What is more interesting to me is that we can see a bit better how the Great Plateau was actually structured itself. Most obviously, we can see the Temple of Time from the Great Sky Island. A very clear indicator that A, at this point in time the Sky Islands have not been raised yet, and B, the Zonai, or at least Roru, settled on the Great Plateau. Once again, we know from Breath of the Wild that the Great Plateau was the birthplace of the Kingdom of Hyrule, so this fits with Roru being the first king. The Temple of Time also sits approximately in the same position as the church structure from the games that bear the same name. So I guess that this one has been built after the Sky Islands were raised? While most of the Hylians probably moved north to Hyrule Castle and Castletown at that point, the plateau was probably still a place of worship, as there are still ruins of Hylian settlements all around it. Just as a quick note, if you like this video, you might also like a lot of the other stuff that I make on my channel. Lately I talk a lot about Zelda, but I try to look at video games, anime, films and other pop culture products in general. Mostly I analyze their stories, characters or general effects they have on their audiences. If that sounds interesting to you, click the subscribe button to stay up to date with any future videos that I make. Those memories are clearly inside the Forgotten Temple. The room with the secret stones can easily be found in-game, and we can even find Sonia's grave there. As this scene happens after Ganondorf stole the secret stone and amplified his power, Roru probably used the Forgotten Temple as a base of operations, which suggests that its existence was hidden from Ganondorf. This is just a guess, but I believe that the temple has something to do with the Zonai descending from the sky. Maybe it was some kind of skyship structure? It lies at the end of a canyon that could have been made from that enormous thing falling down the sky. And apparently the secret stones were also hidden there before Roro gifted them to the sages. There are some theories that think that the Forgotten Temple is the sealed temple from Skyward Sword, but I do not totally agree with that. While there are some similarities in a few design pieces, there are more arguments against it. It's a canyon, not a forest. There are no windows or other way to let sunlight in. The statue of the goddess was always prominently positioned somewhere in the outside, which makes sense as it is a representation of the goddess of light. While you could make an argument that the temple in this form was built around the old one, it seems a bit far-fetched for me. It's not impossible, but in my opinion, way more plausible that this is a different location, and just the statue itself was moved in some way. We know from the quests in Tears of the Kingdom that some shenanigans with those statues are not that out of the ordinary. You can put them upright with a little bit of magic power, so why not move them around if you have thousands of years at your disposal? This one is the easiest, as we know canonically that Ganondorf and Roro fought under the place where Hyrule Castle now stands. This is where Link and Zelda find him in the beginning of the game, and the stone slate under the castle tells us that this is the exact reason why the Hylians built the castle in the first place. What bugs me is that I have no idea why they fought there. Ganondorf took over the Great Plateau, but why would he choose this rather random location to set camp? Well, we do not know how far his armies ventured into the areas of the Gorons and the Zora at this point, which lie to the east. The Lost Woods and the Deku Tree, which is also a very powerful spiritual entity, are to his north, and Roro himself in the Forgotten Temple is to his west. It might be that this was just his front line. This was as far as he could get with his campaign. But hey, that's just a theory. Once again, we can very clearly see the Temple of Time. So from what we know already, we can deduct that this is happening on the Great Plateau. I want to point out a few things though. This river and this bridge gave me a headache at first, since in-game there are no waterways around that area of the plateau. But after I took a look at most of the bridges close by, this one is actually the only one that matches the size shown in this scene. While this does not change anything about the locations we identified so far, it does suggest that there was another river on the plateau at some point, and might even strengthen the theory that there used to be more landmass here. I mean, the Sky Islands have to come from somewhere. Also take a look at this part of the scene. There seems to be another structure in what probably is the west side of the Great Plateau. Not that important at the moment, but keep that in mind for later. In Memory 17, we can see the sages on a cliff, which is definitely the one in front of the Shrine of Resurrection, since it has the texture with the Batman symbol on it. Just another indicator for the Temple of Time being on the Great Plateau, and specifically in the eastern central area. Mineru's study. This could literally be everywhere. We only see an inside room in the style of the typical Zonai architecture we find all over Hyrule, on the Sky Islands and in the depths. You could argue that it is somewhere in Faerun, since this is where the Spirit Temple, the Dragon Head Isle, as well as the classical Zonai ruins are located. It would make sense that Mineru is somewhere close to this, since those locations have the closest connection to her narratively. But as much as I was looking, I couldn't find any place that just screams, hey, this is it. So as of now, with Mineru's study, I can only guess. Another indoor scene that could easily be anywhere. It took me a while to get anything specific here until I noticed that right here we can see the Temple of Time through the window. There are many Zonai buildings that feature this big on the top, small on the bottom architecture, but none as prominently as the Temple of Time. So here we are still on the Great Plateau. Where exactly though is not clear. My first guess would be the Eastern Abbey. We know that there are ruins for a larger structure on the Great Plateau called the Eastern Abbey. This could be where Roro conducts any official king business, like his conversation with Ganondorf. But what bugs me a bit is that this part of the Temple of Time we see through the window, if it was the Eastern Abbey, I feel like we should be closer to the temple. But remember Memory 17, where we could identify something like a structure in the west of the plateau? This might be some kind of castle for Roro and the Hylians, and it would make more sense in terms of distance to the temple. However, if you take a look at the color of the light that comes into the room, it does seem to be closer to the reddish light of sunset than the yellowish one of sunrise. This would mean, since the sun sets in the west and the light comes into the room from the same side we can see the temple at, that the place here should be east of the temple. So it might be that we are still at the Eastern Abbey. That would mean that there is something going on with distances or camera perspectives. It might be that this was intentionally skewed for narrative reasons. Who knows? I rather tend towards the Abbey, since I do not want to invent a random building with no solid evidence except for a blurry image, but it might be possible that this is still elsewhere. If there was a separate building in the west of the plateau, it would probably be around the area of Hopper Pond, probably even closer to Ryogok Shrine. There are some buried ruins in this area, and even a man-made path that leads up to the higher areas of the plateau. A building down here would also be hidden from the perspective of Memory 6. This one took me a while to figure out, but I am quite certain that I found the correct place. There was not that much to go on, since I was quite sure that the pavilion itself would not be standing anymore. The scene plays close to water, but that does not necessarily have to be significant, as we know from other memories. There is a variety of trees in that scene that can also be found in many different areas of the game, so I didn't find them much helpful either. The one thing that I thought was important might be the mountain in the background, so I tried to focus on that. Narratively, we are still in the old Hyrule area, so I thought it would make sense if we were still on the Great Plateau, and the mountain would be some mountain we can see from there. Death Mountain is visible pretty much anywhere in Hyrule, but the shape is different. It is a volcano and far wider on the top. Satori Mountain would be the top choice if we consider to be at the plateau, but it seemed impossible to find an angle where there are no other mountains or high places in the view. The same could be said about Mount Floria and Hebra. At first I did not really consider dueling peaks, since the mountain in the memory is not parted in the middle. But at some point I happened to ride around central Hyrule and glimpsed an angle that looked quite similar to the shape I was looking for. And there are actually two bodies of water close to where I was. At first I looked at the bottomless pond, the place where we first arrive in Hyrule after we come from the Great Sky Island, since from there you couldn't see the gap in dueling peaks at all. It looked interesting, but not quite 100% right. I guess I could have argued that maybe there used to be some landmass here that is now a sky island, but it seemed not quite right yet. And then I found something great. Lake Kolomo has a small little island in the middle, and while I wanted to check out this area anyway, at first I just happened to swim up here to get rid of some annoying moblins, since I didn't want to fight them at the moment. But after I looked around, I think I found the exact location the pavilion was standing at, which was right here where this little Korok made his stone circle. The shape of the mountain in the memory and dueling peaks at this angle is almost identical. We are also at a body of water, and even the short cliffs to where the New Age Hyrule Kolomo garrison will be standing seems to be the exact right spot. What finally sold me was that there are actually both oak-like trees and birches in the immediate vicinity of this lake. It all just fits together perfectly. And you actually have a really nice view of the entrance of the Great Plateau, as well as the Colosseum from here. I can kind of see why this was chosen as a scenic spot for old Hyrule. This does bring up one question though. What exactly happened to Dueling Peaks? And when? If you have an idea, let me know in the comments. Since those memories are happening in front of a very large Zonai building, my first thoughts immediately drifted towards the Temple of Time. However, we never see enough of the place to conclusively confirm this. The door and the rest of the architecture we see looks a little bit different from the Temple of Time on the Sky Islands. And there are no places that I know of that have that many Zonai pillars. This part of the scene made me think that we might still be somewhere around the Temple of Time, simply because we can see a cliff that is very likely the one in front of the Shrine of Resurrection. Behind it we can see what is likely Satori Mountain, and the rock structure in the middle of the screen is probably the Colosseum. However, no matter how much I look, I couldn't find any structure around the Temple of Time in the sky that matches the architecture we see in this balcony. So I guess this is either a separate structure or an addition to the Temple of Time that has not been lifted up when the Sky Islands were raised. Maybe it was destroyed when Ganondorf conquered the Great Plateau. It is probably not the Eastern Abbey, since if you line up the cliff and Satori Mountain in this way, you wouldn't be able to go that far east without seeing the temple in frame. Hi there, Dave from the future here. While I was editing this video, I realized some additional things. There is actually a shot where you can see the full building this memory takes place at. You can see it is quite low, so we are definitely not in front of the Temple of Time. Also, right here, there is a moment where you maybe see something that might be the Temple of Time. So this memory could actually be located in that structure on the Western Great Plateau I was talking about earlier. Still just an idea, but definitely possible. Here we see the southwest side of the plateau. This is probably the same cliff we can see from Ganondorf's position in memory number 6. This could be an indicator to this scene playing closer to the western end of the plateau. But once again, this is very inconclusive. The sequence could just cut to any random place on the plateau.
So that was basically it. A quick analysis of what I believe are the places shown in the Dragon Tier memories in A Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I don't know if this is going to be helpful for anyone. Maybe someone wants to recreate old Hyrule in Minecraft or something like that. But I hope it was at least a little bit insightful. I hope you liked the video, and if you did, just press the corresponding button. And I hope to see you guys soon. Bye bye.